Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. In 2012, the Rio +20 Conference on Sustainable Development gathered in order to take stock of the implementation of the UN Agenda on Sustainable Development. The meeting took place against the nearing deadline for the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals, which had been agreed in 2000, and was also an opportunity to reflect more generally on the state of implementation of the outcomes of the UN conferences which had taken place throughout previous decades. Clearly, the issue of the mainstreaming of sustainability into all development activities was of concern for delegations, but also the gaps in the implementation of the MDGs and of other agreed UN outcomes. The Millennium Development Goals, in spite of their possible shortcomings and of the uneven results obtained in their realization, were generally considered to have provided a powerful instrument for rallying the international community around a focused development agenda with measurable goals, targets, and indicators, which would serve as a reference for countries to target their planning policies and for donors to prioritize their assistance for development. Their potential in terms of communication and mobilization was generally recognized. On the other hand, reservations had been expressed on the way which was deemed to be maybe too technocratic the MDGs had been devised. Finally, the MDGs constituted an agenda mostly for the developing countries, targeting issues such as poverty reduction, hunger, mother and child mortality, education and health, although there was already, of course, an MDG on environmental sustainability, and MDG 8 on the global partnership brought in the support of the international community for the implementation of these goals. With this in mind, the Rio Conference of 2012 tasked an intergovernmental open working group with developing a new set of goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, that would be, as has already been said, universally applicable and would address the three dimensions of sustainability, that is, economic sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. According to the Rio outcome document, the SDGs were to be concise, easy to communicate, limited in number, aspirational, global in nature, and universally applicable to all countries while taking into account different national situations. The outcome document of Rio provided in this regard a framework for action with a list of topics that could inspire the formulation of the SDGs, such as poverty eradication, food security and nutrition and sustainable agriculture, water and sanitation, health and population, climate, oceans, etc. The idea was to make more coherent the various strands of the UN agenda as embodied in the outcomes of previous conferences, to integrate more clearly the issues of sustainability in its three dimensions into the future UN agenda, to bridge the gaps in terms of implementation and commitments, and to deal with the new realities, as the Minister said, of a world that has moved forward, where lines between North and South have become blurred. The open working group created by Rio met for about 1 year and handed its report in August 2014. The open working group has reached a consensus on a compendium of 17 goals and 169 targets. The intergovernmental process was complex and quite different from the process which had led to the devising of the Millennium Development Goals. On the one hand, the SDGs and their targets probably miss some of the expected conciseness and relevance, On the other hand, the ownership of member states in their definition can hardly be questioned. Obviously, the scope of the SDGs is much broader than that of the MDGs. Their contents are more politically loaded, and their targets probably not as neatly or even scientifically designed as we would like to see them. For some, the sheer number of goals and targets is seen as disconcerting and unmanageable, in particular in terms of easy communication and mobilization, which was, after all, an express mandate from Rio. On the other hand, having brought the 193 member states of the UN together on such an intricate set of issues is no small achievement, and this should be acknowledged. The new goals cover much of the unfinished business of the MDGs, but as prescribed by Rio, also outlined a universal agenda by including economic, social, and sustainability elements such as climate, oceans, energy, infrastructure, employment, gender, and the fight against inequalities. It has been particularly difficult to combine the three dimensions into each SDG, and it will remain a challenge for the future in terms of designing coherent policies for the implementation of the SDGs. Two SDGs are worth mentioning that, although mentioned in the Rio outcome document, were not part of its framework for action. SDG 16, which reads, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels, with targets such as reducing the level of violence, reducing corruption, and adopting non-discriminatory laws. The other goal that I wanted to mention is SDG 17 on the means of implementation and on the revitalization of the global partnership, which will be very important for solidarity at the global level. The report of the Open Working Group on the SDGs was endorsed by the General Assembly as constituting the main basis for the work on the post-2015 development agenda. This report has now become so central to the discussions in New York that many delegations have become wary of any attempt to improve on any of its elements for fear of reopening the SDG package. Many delegations were under the impression that some of the targets at least could be, if not improved, at least submitted to technical proofing. This looks more difficult to achieve than originally foreseen. As for the indicators, which will have to come, there is an emerging consensus on the advisability to entrust their development to the experts rather than to a new intergovernmental process. This will probably take place after the adoption of the post-2015 agenda. In September 2015, the heads of states and governments will meet in New York in order to adopt this post-2015 development agenda. They will have before them not only the SDGs, but also a political declaration, as well as the results and recommendations of the Conference on Financing for Development, which will be held in Addis Ababa in July. The political declaration should frame the rationale for this new and transformative agenda. We hope that it will be a strong document capable of galvanizing not only governments, but also public opinions at all levels in favor of this new global endeavor. The Conference on Financing for Development, although theoretically a follow-up to the conferences of Monterey and Doha, has been moved forward by 1 year in order to provide answers to the questions, in particular from developing countries, about the resources and other means necessary to implement the new agenda. Negotiations on the outcome document of Addis Ababa have only started 2 weeks ago on the basis of a document that covers the following issues. 1, domestic public finance, including mobilization of domestic resources, fiscal policies, good governance, corruption. 2, domestic and international private business and finance, including remittances. 3, international public finance, including targets for official development assistance in general and for the LDCs in particular. 4, international trade for development. 5, debt and sustainability. And 6, systemic issues such as the representation of developing countries in the international financial institutions or also the regulation of financial markets. 2 new means of implementation are also mentioned in the draft outcome for Addis, although it's not entirely clear whether they will be dealt with under the financing for development track or separately. Those 2 issues are the question of technology, innovation, and capacity building, and the other one, data monitoring and follow-up. Since the discussions have only started, it is too early to comment much further, but most observers consider that a good result of the Addis process is essential to clear the path to a smooth adoption of the post-2015 agenda. Finally, although the negotiations on climate change have followed their own track through the successive COPs, culminating in COP21 in Paris in December of this year, it is understood that addressing climate change, an already agreed SDG, will be an integral part of the post-2015 agenda. The modalities for this integration remain to be defined. Before turning to the issue of decent work and social protection, I would like at this stage to encapsulate some of the characteristics of the post-2015 development agenda as they emerge not only from the texts, but also from the spirit of negotiations, brainstorming, and conversations in New York. I realize this might be a very personal interpretation of the ongoing dynamics, but I'll give it a try. First, as already said, the post-2015 development agenda will be a universal agenda, applicable for developed countries as well as for developing countries. For developed countries, this implies a new focus in terms of internal organization for its implementation, involving ministries and coordination mechanisms different from those dealing with the MDGs. 2, this agenda is supposed to be a transformative agenda, breaking away with unsustainability in all its dimensions. 3, some innovative elements included in the Rio outcome document, such as the concept of green economy, seem to have been lost in translation. 4, this agenda has a strong focus on reducing inequalities, not only between countries, but also within countries, between men and women, rural and urban, general population, and marginalized groups. The motto is, nobody should be left behind. There is a strong SDG on gender equality and another on the reduction of inequality. 5, as a consequence, future policies should aim at building inclusive societies, and this is recognized also through the SDGs. 6, the new agenda has a strong focus on people as being at the center of development, as well as on the protection and promotion of human rights. 7, it also has a strong focus on protecting the planet. 8, the need to build resilient and transparent institutions serving the interests of people is very much underlined. 9, given the magnitude of the task, the new agenda aims at involving not only governments, but all stakeholders, such as the private sector and civil society, through partnerships. 10, the issue of follow-up and monitoring remains complicated, with developing countries resisting what they perceive as intrusive monitoring, although many agree that implementation is crucial. 11, the availability of reliable, up-to-date, and disaggregated data in order to design and implement the policies required for the implementation of the SDGs remains a major hurdle and will become an issue also in terms of capacity building. 12, there is a wider acceptance to discuss the role of domestic resources in the financing of development in terms of ownership, predictability, and sustainability. But what can be seen as the unmet commitments in terms of ODA will remain a thorny issue in the discussions on financing. And finally, availability of sustainable technologies has been only marginally addressed so far. I now come to the last part of this presentation, the creation and the work of the group of friends on sustainable development in New York, which Belgium chairs with Angola. I realize today's topics will encompass much broader issues than just decent work, but I will leave this to others. The concept of decent work for sustainable development was already well anchored in the outcome document of Rio 2012, often in conjunction with references to full employment and job creation, with statements such as, we reaffirm the importance of supporting developing countries in their efforts to eradicate poverty and promoting full and productive employment and decent work for all, complemented by effective social policies, including social protection floors. That's in para 23 of Rio, and in para 30 we read, it is essential to generate decent jobs and incomes that decrease disparities in the standards of living. But of course, mainly in Rio, there is a strong chapter on promoting full and productive employment, decent work for all, and social protections that is included in the framework for actions that was used later to devise the SDGs. In the open working group proposal on SDGs, decent work for all is included in goal number 8 on promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Target 8.3 reads, promote development-oriented policies that support productive activities, decent job creation, entrepreneurship, etc. Target 8.5 reads, by 2030, achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men. Target 8.7 deals with the elimination of child labor, and target 8.8 with the rights of workers. Decent work and social protection are also addressed directly or indirectly under other goals, such as Goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere, or Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. As said before, with its strong focus on poverty elimination and the reduction of inequalities, the post-2015 agenda creates a very hospitable environment for the decent work and social protection agenda. With this in mind, together with our colleagues of Angola and with ILO, Belgium, which has always been a staunch supporter of these issues, launched in September 2014 the Group of Friends of Decent Work for Sustainable Development during a side event on employment and decent work for inclusive and sustainable development organized by the Ford Foundation and ILO. The then Minister for Cooperation of Belgium, in his statement on this occasion, insisted on the need to reduce unacceptable levels of inequalities and on the need to avoid a dilution of decent work and social protection as negotiations proceeded. By launching this group of friends, the objective of Belgium was to be, together with Angola and with the support of ILO, the advocate of decent work and to create an inter-regional group in support of this agenda. The group of friends has met since several times, with meetings planned according to the calendar of relevant UN events where decent work is directly or indirectly on the agenda, such as the Commission on Social Development or the recent integration segment of the Economic and Social Council. Attendance has been consistently high, thanks to the relevance of the topic, but also to the high-quality briefings provided by ILO, including by Director General Guy Ryder. There is a high level of interest as to the feasibility of implementing decent work and social protection policies in developing countries. The latest event, organized in the framework of the Group of Friends, was a panel meeting at ministerial level in the margins of the integration segment of ECOSOC. This integration segment dealt itself this year with the topic of achieving sustainable development through employment and decent work for all. The panel, with the participation of the Director General of ILO, of European Commissioner Marianne Thyssen, and of ministers from Colombia, South Africa, Indonesia, and Poland, addressed the issue of realizing decent work for sustainable development and was an occasion to discuss country strategies. A shared concern of the countries represented was clearly the high rate of unemployment among young people, including those holding a degree, and the need to revise curricula and training, including vocational training, in order to adapt to the changing job market. The Group of Friends is currently discussing possible events to hold in New York in parallel with the summit on the post-2015 agenda. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. I would just like to say very briefly that through the cooperation with ILO in particular, we have managed to move a lot of issues that were primarily discussed in Geneva to the attention of the delegations in New York, and that has been very useful for our work there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador.